Hello everyone, and welcome to another alt history channel video, whatever you want to call it again. And we're back in Hoi 4 since I am damned to do this game for the rest of my life. So, as you can tell by the look of this map that is slightly messed up, what kind of Hoi 4 thing am I doing today that's alt history? Well, if you can't read from the title, here's what has happened. After a failed Allied invasion of Italy in 1943, the Soviet Union decides, screw you, I'm out. I am not dealing with you anymore, and they peace out with Germany separately, and then they go on to do whatever they'd like. So what do I think would happen? First of all, if the Germans and the Soviets had peaced out, first of all, this is getting turned down. Professionality. Well, first of all, what would happen is the Finnish and the Germans and the Romanians, and basically all of them, would peace out. I know this isn't exactly what the border would have been at. I believe the Germans would have been at the gates of Leningrad, of course, still, and they would have been somewhere around this line. But you're getting a separate peace, so I believe they would go back to this stupid river line like every other video I make. It is just a nice defensible border, and that's probably what would happen. Finland would receive their territories back here, and Germany would gain basically all of Lithuania, Belarus, half of Ukraine, and half of Latvia, and Romania would get what they were promised in the war, and basically make this weird, disgusting, thick Romania-stan thing. Now what would the Soviets go on to do? That they are now basically free from dealing with the Germans, even though they did just sign a peace deal a few years prior, about 5 years prior to be exact, and Germany stabbed them in the back. Well, since they were most likely very tired from this war, I think they could plan on this one lasting at least a decade. Well, Russia would focus more on the Asian front, as you can tell by all of this. Russia would essentially win the war against Japan. They would come in and basically wipe the floor with them, as the Allies in this timeline in 1943, ignore the time up there, were only basically in Papua New Guinea and a few American islands. So the Russians, having a massive land border, could basically just storm them and overrun the Japanese, basically annexing all of Japan, Korea, and China. Ignore Mongolia. I screwed up the console controls. So Korea, Japan, and China would all be under Russian control, and I do believe they would most likely keep Manchuria as a little trophy and have their warm water port they so desperately have desired. While the Americans and the British would basically be sidelined as secondary partners, they would basically get all of the islands. I do think they would get at least something. America would probably get Taiwan and, Okinawa, that's what that place is called, as they are a little bit farther away for the Russians, and the Russians and Chinese are not known exactly for their naval prowess. And I do believe they probably could have gotten Hainan as well. Now, as you can see from over here, the British control French Indochina and Indonesia. Well, what has happened there? Well, including basically all of Africa. After the end of basically the Soviet front, the Allies attempt to continue the fight against the Germans, but with no avail, and realize this is dumb and stupid and we are not going to win this, and they will live to fight another day. So what has essentially happened is the British have annexed all of the French territory. They have formed their unity government, even though it is not very unified. It is basically just a few Frenchmen joining the British government, and they take in all of the exiled governments in Western Europe mainly. The French, the Belgians, the Luxembourgish, the Netherlanders, Dutch, whatever you want to call them, the Danes, and the Norwegians. The British would annex, of course, the Faroe Islands. They would annex all of the African territories except for the Portuguese and the Spanish ones, even though that they would be nominally allied to the Germans. They weren't in the war, so they might get a pass, and these colonies are largely unimportant. Mainly the Spanish ones are. The Portuguese ones, it's not worth the trouble. And in the Americas, the British would take over all their colonies as well as America getting Greenland, because Denmark is dead and they can't tell us no. So where would this leave the world? It would leave Europe largely under the control of the Germans, although it would be precarious. Switzerland would die, as you can see here. I have them essentially dead, and this is the map of Europe. Turkey would be largely the only neutral nation in Europe and would still be in a pickle because they border the Allies to the south with Iraq, Iran, and Syria, which is now British Syria. To their northeast, they border the Soviets, and over here, they border the Nazis in Bulgaria. So Turkey would be the Casablanca spy area where everybody spies on each other. Now, what do I think would happen? This could very well be a darkest timeline, quote unquote, because the British would never decolonize, and there would be no decolonization whatsoever. They would basically hold on to everything as they see it in a sort of, if they give an inch to the Germans or the Soviets, they could tag up on the Allies and take them over. Basically like a three-way race. Two of them trying to team up and take out the other ones, as the Soviets would see the Allies and the Germans as unreliable because the Germans stabbed them in the back, and the Americans and British couldn't do anything against the Germans. The Germans seeing the Soviets as scary and the Allies as weak, and the Allies being, well, crap, we only have this big African territory and that's about it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this alt history, let me know down in the description. And if you'd like me to do like a mild playthrough of some of these and seeing what would actually happen, let me know down in the comments, and I will see you all next week.